I've learned many things in my 72 years of life, but nothing taught me more about people than the Thanksgiving my grandson almost froze on my front porch while the rest of my family passed around turkey, cranberry sauce, and warm laughter, pretending everything in our world was perfect. I remember standing by the dining room archway that evening, watching them with a quiet smile, though my chest felt heavy. My daughter Linda carved the turkey like she always did, moving with the confidence of someone who believed she held the family together. My son-in-law Mark complained about the football team losing. My other grandchildren argued about who got the bigger slice of pie. Everyone looked comfortable. Everyone looked warm. Except the one person who deserved that warmth more than anyone. My grandson, 8-year-old Tyler, stood outside in the cold November wind because his father, my own son Michael, told him he didn't need dinner since boys who get bad grades don't get privileges. And the rest of the family? They simply let it happen. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. At my age, you learn that loudness rarely changes people. But silence, calm, steady silence, can shake the ground under someone's feet. So I watched. I waited. I observed every choice each family member made. And I quietly made my own. People assume revenge comes from anger. But the strongest revenge I ever delivered came from disappointment. Deep, quiet disappointment that cut far deeper than rage ever could. That Thanksgiving changed my family forever. Not through yelling. Not through punishment. But through a single, patient plan. A plan that made every one of them face the truth they had ignored for far too long. And it began with a shivering boy on my front porch, while his family enjoyed a warm Thanksgiving dinner inside. To make sense of what happened, you need to know the story before that cold November night. I live in a quiet American suburb, the kind where lawns are trimmed the same height and neighbors wave from halfway down the street. My house isn't big, but it holds history. Faded photos on shelves, old quilts folded across the sofa, wooden floors that creak in familiar places. I've lived here most of my life. My family used to fill this house with laughter every holiday. But over the years, something changed. Maybe it was pride. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe people stop seeing each other clearly when they get too comfortable. My daughter Linda grew up responsible and confident, the planner of the family. She handled every holiday schedule like it was an executive board meeting. She meant well, at least I believed she did, but over time, her confidence hardened into something sharp. She judged too quickly, forgave too slowly, and believed discipline mattered more than compassion. My son-in-law Mark followed her lead in everything. He wasn't cruel, but he was indifferent. And sometimes indifference becomes its own kind of cruelty. My son Michael, he was different. Michael had always been fragile, though he tried to hide it behind bravado. After his wife left years earlier, he became strict. Too strict. He believed discipline would make his son tough enough for life. And somewhere along the way, his idea of discipline turned into punishment for every small flaw. And then there was Tyler. The boy had my heart the moment he was born. Big brown eyes, shy smile, endlessly curious. He was gentle, too gentle for the world he was being raised in. Every time he came to my house, he relaxed like he could finally breathe. He reminded me of his father at that age, before life hardened him. Thanksgiving was always a big event in our family. Even when they argued, even when I felt the distance growing, they all came. I cooked all morning. I set the table with the same plates I'd used since Linda and Michael were kids. I thought tradition would hold us together. But tradition can't save people who slowly forget how to care for one another. A week before Thanksgiving, I noticed something different about Tyler when he visited me. His shoulders slumped. He avoided eye contact. He picked at his fingers. When I finally coaxed it out of him, he whispered, "Dad says I ruin everything." Those words didn't come from nowhere. They came from a home where love was conditional. I wanted to intervene. I wanted to pull Michael aside and talk sense into him. But I also knew my son. Talking at the wrong moment would only make things worse. He would defend himself, defend his choices, and shut me out entirely. So I watched.
I waited. I stayed calm.
It's hard seeing your children grow into people you don't fully recognize. Harder still watching your grandchildren suffer because of it. But that Thanksgiving, I finally saw how far the distance had grown. And I realized something needed to change. Quietly. Strategically.
And for good.
The day began calmly enough. The house filled with the smell of roasted turkey and herbs. The windows fogged from the warm kitchen. Leaves rustled outside in the cold wind, gathering in little piles along the driveway. By 4 o'clock, everyone had arrived, everyone except Michael and Tyler. When they finally walked in, something felt wrong. Tyler's coat wasn't zipped. His cheeks were red from the cold. His hands trembled slightly. And Michael walked ahead of him, not beside him, like the boy was an afterthought. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said with a smile. Michael didn't look at me when he answered. "Yeah." That was my first warning. During dinner preparations, Tyler stood in a corner while the other kids played. Normally he jumped right in, but that day he kept glancing nervously at his father. I pulled him aside gently. "You feeling all right, buddy?" He nodded without looking up. "I'm okay." But the truth hid in his eyes. Soon, dinner was ready. The table looked beautiful: golden turkey, warm bread rolls, mashed potatoes, everything steaming in that comforting way only holiday meals can. Everyone sat. Except Tyler. Michael stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. "You're not eating." The room went stiff. Linda looked at her brother. "Michael, it's Thanksgiving." "He doesn't deserve dinner," he replied calmly, slicing into his turkey.
"He got a D in math. Again."
Tyler stared at the floor. I waited for someone, anyone, to speak up. Linda shook her head but said nothing. Mark shrugged and passed the gravy boat to his daughter. I felt something inside me tighten. "Michael," I said quietly, "he can eat. He's a child."
"No," my son replied.
"He needs to learn." And then, without another word, he told Tyler to go outside.
Not to his room.
Not to sit in the living room.
Outside.
Stand on the porch until dinner's over. The boy obeyed with a tiny nod, walked outside, and closed the door behind him. The wind pushed against the house, rattling the window near the table. I stared at the door long after he left. The family returned to eating. Someone complained that the sweet potato casserole needed more cinnamon. Someone else commented on a new coworker. Their voices drifted together, warm,
comfortable,
completely unaware of the cold child on the other side of the wall. I didn't argue.
I didn't stand up or shout.
I simply observed them. I noticed how quickly people rationalize cruelty when it isn't aimed at them. How silence spreads through a room like a fog, suffocating common sense. How a child's suffering can become invisible if the adults are too wrapped up in their own worlds. Inside me, a quiet plan began forming. I didn't know every detail yet, but I knew the destination. This would not be forgotten. Not brushed aside. Not excused. I got up silently and walked to the front door. Through the small glass panel, I saw Tyler hugging himself, rubbing his hands together, bouncing on his toes to stay warm. My heart cracked, but not loudly. Sometimes hearts break quietly, leaving a deep, steady ache. "Come inside," I whispered when I opened the door. He looked over his shoulder toward the dining room. "Dad said." "I'm your grandfather," I said softly. "And in my house, no child stands in the cold on Thanksgiving." I wrapped my old coat around him and guided him into the living room, away from the others. I gave him a sandwich, warm milk, and a blanket. He ate slowly, eyes watery, not because he was sad, but because he finally felt safe. When I returned to the table, I didn't mention where I'd been. No one asked. That silence told me everything I needed to know. And it told me exactly what I needed to do. My revenge did not begin that night. Revenge is not anger. Not immediate. Not reckless. Real revenge, quiet, moral revenge, requires patience. I realized in that moment that this family had drifted far from the values I raised them on: kindness, empathy, responsibility. Watching Michael freeze out his own son wasn't just a moment of bad judgment, it was the symptom of something far deeper. And the rest of the family enabling it? That was the disease. So I made a decision. I would not confront them with words. I would confront them with truth. The months after Thanksgiving moved slowly. Winter settled over the suburb, painting roofs with frost and putting a quiet hush over the streets. During that time, I began inviting Tyler over more often, not to undermine Michael, but to give the boy a place where warmth was unconditional. We baked cookies on weekends. We built puzzles. I taught him how to sand wood. He talked more. Smiled more. His shoulders opened up. His voice grew steadier. One day while helping me shovel snow, he told me, "I like being here. I can breathe here." That sentence stayed with me. Meanwhile, I watched the rest of the family from a distance. Not judging. Just observing. Linda grew more impatient at work, according to her husband. She took on too much, bossed everyone, and snapped at small mistakes. Mark complained that she treated their home like a competition field. Michael, on the other hand, sank deeper into frustration. Every tiny flaw in Tyler became a personal insult. Every imperfect report card became a crisis. And the boy's spirit faded under that weight. I never lectured my son. He would have shut down instantly. Instead, I prepared something far more powerful. By spring, I had gathered enough observations, real moments, real patterns. People don't change when you attack them. They change when they see themselves clearly. So I invited the whole family over for dinner in late May. Not for a holiday. Not for a reunion. Just a simple family meal. They came, curious, relaxed, unaware. After dinner, I stood from the table and said, "I want to show you all something." They followed me to the living room. I sat in my old recliner, the same chair where I'd rocked both my children when they were babies. "What's this about, Dad?" Michael asked. I looked at each of them, slowly, deliberately. "It's about Thanksgiving," I said calmly. Linda shifted uncomfortably. Michael frowned. Mark folded his arms. I continued, "And it's about the choices we make when no one challenges us." Then I told them everything. Not with anger. Not with accusations. Not with raised voice. I spoke gently. Firmly. Like a man who had lived long enough to understand the weight of his words. I described how Tyler looked standing alone in the cold. How the wind bit at his small hands. How the house was warm, bright, full of food, while a child shivered outside. I described how every adult at the table stayed silent. How they pretended nothing was wrong. And then I said the most important part. "I'm not angry at any of you. I'm disappointed. Not because of what happened that evening, but because it revealed who you've become." There was no defense. No denial. No quick excuses. Just stillness. Then I revealed my plan, calmly, without drama. "From now on," I said, "I will only host family events for those who put kindness first. Not image. Not discipline. Not pride." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Clear. Unavoidable. I told them I would be watching, not to judge, but to ensure my home remained a place of warmth, not cruelty. And if someone cannot offer that warmth, I added softly, they will not be welcomed here. The room went still. That was the moment everything shifted. The quiet revenge wasn't punishment, it was reflection. It was accountability. It was letting them sit with their own silence until they finally heard it. Change did not happen overnight. But slowly, very slowly, it began. Michael was the first to react. Not outwardly. Not defensively. Something in him cracked that night, though he hid it with a stiff jaw and crossed arms. For weeks after my talk, he barely spoke to me. But I didn't push. I simply kept inviting Tyler over, giving the boy the warmth his home lacked. Then one Sunday afternoon in early summer, Michael showed up at my door alone.
No warnings. No calls.
He stood there awkwardly, hands in pockets, eyes unfocused. "Dad," he said quietly, "was I really that bad?" I stepped aside and let him in. We sat in the living room. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, in a voice I hadn't heard since he was a child, he whispered. I didn't realize how far I'd gone.
He didn't cry.
He didn't break down dramatically. Instead, he looked exhausted, as if finally confronting the truth drained the strength he'd been holding for years.
We talked for hours. About pressure. About fear.
About the illusions people create when they feel they're failing.
He apologized. Not with big speeches.
With small, sincere words that felt real.
From then on, I saw him try. He let Tyler breathe.
He let the boy make mistakes. He started asking how he could help, instead of punishing every flaw.
Linda changed too, slowly.
She stopped criticizing so quickly.
She listened more. She softened.
One afternoon in July, she brought me flowers and said, "I didn't realize how cold I've become." Mark apologized too, but his change was quieter, a shift in his behavior rather than words. By the time Thanksgiving came around again, the entire family felt different. Not perfect.
Not magically healed. But humbler. Softer. More aware.
That Thanksgiving, I set the table again.
Same plates. Same food.
When Tyler entered, Michael knelt beside him and zipped up the boy's coat gently. "You're staying inside today," he said with a soft smile. Tyler laughed and hugged him. And I, sitting at the head of the table, felt something warm settle in my chest.
Not triumph. Not victory. Peace. Quiet, steady peace.
My family had learned the lesson I'd hoped for, not through shouting, but through reflection. Not through force, but through truth.
And the best part?
The warmth they showed wasn't just for me.
It was for each other.
People say revenge is about hurting those who hurt you. But I disagree. The best revenge is restoring what they lost in themselves, without ever lifting your voice. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to that first Thanksgiving. I remember the cold wind rattling the windows. I remember the sound of laughter at the table. I remember the stillness on the porch when I saw Tyler standing there alone. That moment could have turned me bitter. It could have made me resent my own children. It could have pushed me into anger I would never escape. But life has taught me something important. Anger burns fast. Wisdom burns slow.
I chose the slow burn.
I chose to show them their own reflection, not to shame them, but to wake them up. Because some people don't realize they're causing harm. Some people repeat cycles they never healed from. Some people lose their way quietly, one small decision at a time. And sometimes it takes a moment of stillness, a story told softly, a truth laid bare, to bring them back. Tyler is older now.
More confident. More secure.
His father no longer disciplines him with fear. Linda no longer organizes her emotions like checklists. The whole family feels warmer, more connected. Sometimes people ask me how I changed them.
I didn't.
They changed themselves when they finally saw the truth, carefully, gently, without noise. And I learned something too. Revenge doesn't always have to break someone. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is helping them rebuild.
Not by force.
Not by anger. But by guiding them toward the reflection they tried so long to avoid. That Thanksgiving will stay in my memory until the end of my days, not because of the hurt, but because of the healing that came after. And if there's one thing I hope my family remembers long after I'm gone, it's this. Sometimes silence is the best revenge.